What is joy without sorrow? What is success without failure? What is a win without a loss? What is health without illness? You have to experience both if you are to appreciate the other. There's always going to be suffering. It's how you look at your suffering, how you deal with it, that will define you. And this week's opening quote comes from Mark Twain. Welcome to Surviving the Matrix. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Maxwell Igan. It's a pleasure to be with you once again, and I will be your host for the next hour. There's always going to be balance in the world, folks. Things always return to balance. No matter how imbalanced the world becomes, things always do return to balance. Indeed, when you look at the world today and you see the amount of negativity that's happening, you see that there is a grand awakening that is happening with this negativity. So it's always going to be balanced, folks. This is simply the way the two polarities of energy that are existence play out against each other. And you can call these two polarities of energy good and bad, light and dark, positive and negative, love and fear, whatever you want, however you choose to define them. But it's important to recognize that there are two clear polarities of energy that we experience in this reality, and that these two energies are always in a state of balance. Hence, the more negative the powers that believe they be make things, the larger the awakening of the general population by default. Of course, things may get a little imbalanced at times during the process, but ultimately things always return to equilibrium, whereby both polarities are in balance with each other. Now, when you think of reality as functioning this way, according to two very distinct polarities of energy, you can also apply this to the physical world and to our social systems. It's like what I attempted to present you with on the show last week when I was attempting to portray the universe, or the concept of the universe, as existing as a computer model. What I was attempting to do with that show is to provide you with kind of a holographic image of reality that you could then superimpose over our social and economic systems and use as a template that would provide you an overview of our current situation, because by applying the holographic template that I provided you with last week to reality, you can see how the energy flows work, you can see what the problem is. There it is, there's your problem, and there's the solution as well. And that's what I've been attempting to present people with these shows. But if you can look at reality as existing according to two distinct polarities of energy, you begin to see how we're being played and how we can make a difference. But it's difficult in conveying this type of information to people, because you start talking about energy and polarities and love and fear, and they say, oh, this is New Age mumbo jumbo. They're just not seeing it as a necessary metaphor to use to be able to explain the system from a spiritual perspective, because you can't just look at the system from a left brain analytical perspective. And that is unfortunately what many people do. Many people, when attempting to address this system or find some remedy within this system, they believe it will be found simply via means of filling out forms and writing things on pieces of paper and doing things in the physical world. They don't understand that there is a spiritual understanding that needs to be applied to the situation as well. Apart from the fact that there will never be any remedy to our situation found in any piece of paper anywhere, it's important to understand that you cannot just look at things from an analytical, left brain, physical perspective. You've got to understand that we are being controlled via spiritual and emotional and psychic and mental mechanisms as well. So there's no good looking at things just from a left brain perspective. Just because the powers that believe they be have educated people not to think about the right brain doesn't mean that they don't think about the right brain and they don't use the right brain in order to influence us. And in fact, it is such a predominant influence in our lives that they have worked around the clock to ensure that we never look to our right brain. We never think about reality in that way, because if we were to think about reality in that way and think about it from an energetic perspective, we'd find that the solutions to our problem are really quite simple. And that's why the education system has trained us never to go to the right brain. So indeed, that is precisely where we should be looking for the remedy to our situation. It exists in applying right brain thinking to a left brain world. Because the thing is, the left brain world is the world that we see due to our education system, but in fact it is a world that consists of the thought processes of both sides of the brain, left and right. But we're only applying a left brain thinking to this left brain world because the right brain side of the world is hidden from us. And in fact, because the education system is so heavily directed towards the left brain, and such an extraordinary attempt has been undertaken in order to keep us from using our right brain, well, this should serve as a huge clue for people. Perhaps there is a reason they don't want you to think with your right brain. And as I said, perhaps that is precisely why you should be looking there, and that is why you should be applying a right brain understanding to what appears to be a left brain world. And that's what I was attempting to do with last week's show. In fact, that's what I've attempted to do with many of the broadcasts right since the show began back in 2008. Just attempt to help people shift their perspective a little bit so it opens up the other side of their brain and they can see that there are realities to a lot of spiritual understandings of the world. It's just that we've been trained to think these are all airy-fairy and don't have any physical application, when in fact they do. And not only do they have physical application, but these concepts are also essential in gaining any true understanding of the situation we're currently in. It's just that these concepts need to be approached with a degree of balance. And that's the problem, really, that we see when applying these type of understandings, because many people will only apply a spiritual understanding to a situation and attempt to deal with it by spiritual means, or they will simply attempt to deal with it via physical means while negating these spiritual understandings completely. And it's important that we do both. We need to have balance. People need to approach physical problems with a spiritual understanding. And in the other extreme, people need to apply their spiritual understandings to the physical world. You can't just do one. You've got to exist in a state of balance. All spiritual understandings have a physical application. You exist in a 3D physical world for a reason, folks, and you're supposed to participate in this world using all of these spiritual and mental tools that you've been granted. It's just important to realize that this balance must be maintained in order for things to work properly and for things to function. And it must especially be applied to our current global situation in order for this situation to be healed. And healing is truly what the world needs more than anything right now, folks. That's what the physical world needs. It's what the natural world needs. It's what the human spirit needs. It's what human consciousness itself needs. All life on this planet, I feel, even the energy field itself, it needs healing. And we're not going to heal it through violence, through anger, through aggravation and agitation. We're going to heal it through a calm understanding of what this situation currently is, what the real problems we currently face are, and via applying a calm, rational, logical, and highly moral response to this situation. If we can do that as a united community, then we will heal the world in a day. But if we're going to maintain an imbalance in approaching this situation, then we're never going to get anywhere. We're just going to continue to exacerbate the situation via confrontation, and that's all it does. Violent confrontation, anger, heated exchanges are counterproductive. Arguments are truly the worst form of communication. In fact, arguments are rarely communication at all. So we don't want to be arguing with people. We want to be simply stating moral facts and seeing whether these facts can be proved to be wrong. Because what we're going to find is that they can't, and that the politicians back themselves into a corner by even attempting to address these issues. But unless people start to speak their truth themselves from their own place in the world, then we're not going to get anywhere, folks. We need people to stand up and call a spade a spade. I mean, you can't just stand around and allow the world to be destroyed around you because you're in a state of fear, because all you're doing is creating that which you fear via your inaction. And the need for people to speak their truth and to start speaking out about the state of the world and the actions of our politicians has never been more urgent, simply because of the lengths that these people are going to lock down this world and to curtail any expansion of human consciousness. Just what we've seen here recently in Australia with this ridiculous siege that we saw. I mean, even if it wasn't a staged event, which I believe it was, it has all the hallmarks of a setup, the media hype surrounding the event was absolutely astronomical. I mean, here you've got a guy with a shotgun who took over a chocolate shop and they shut down Sydney airspace because of a guy in a chocolate shop with a shotgun. Think about that, folks. They shut down Sydney airspace for a day. And there you have Tony Abbott on TV sitting in front of a Christmas tree. A Christmas tree, for God's sake. He's sitting in front of a Christmas tree. No us and them connotations there at all, folks. We're Christian, they're Muslim. We're Christian, they're Muslim. It's Christmas time. There's a terrorist attack at Christmas time. They're trying to destroy us. They're trying to destroy us. And they're calling this guy a fake Muslim in one breath and an Islamic extremist in another. And I would say that the whole thing was staged, folks. I've actually heard from people who are in Sydney and they say there was an incredibly large police presence in Martin Place the night before the siege happened. There was even one road that was cordoned off before the siege happened. And I've actually heard from people who are not prepared to come forward that have suggested that the train station was actually evacuated a few minutes before the siege happened as well. And I'm not able to confirm that last point for you, but I am able to confirm that there was a large police presence in Martin Place the night before, even though Martin Place was virtually a ghost town. So it has all the hallmarks of a staged event, folks. Not to mention the fact that the alleged perpetrator was very well known to the police anyway. And so that's two alleged terror attacks that have been directed towards Australians now. One, of course, in the Bali bombing under the Liberal government, of which Tony Abbott was a member. The Bali bombing, of course, bearing all the earmarks of a false flag event and has actually been proven very amply to have been a false flag event, which did not occur in anywhere near the manner in which we are told, and that the Sari Club could not possibly have suffered the damage it suffered due to a fertiliser-packed truck. We've been able to successfully establish USA intelligence and Mossad involvement in the Bali bombings, and the fact that the story of what explosive was used changed as soon as the Australian police came on the scene. So that was the first terror attack that was allegedly directed against Australians, which of course served very well to change public opinion and get us involved in the Iraq war, which we didn't want to participate in until that attack occurred. And the second, this current fiasco we've seen in Sydney, again under a Liberal government of which Tony Abbott is a member. It would seem that any time Tony Abbott is anywhere near the political halls, Australia suffers a terrorist attack. Perhaps it's the simple fact that Tony Abbott is such a blatantly imbecilic sociopath that he simply causes reality to mirror that energy back to him, or the other possibility is that dirty little Tony has his dirty little fingers in all the dirty little deeds that we see around us. He certainly is a dirty little man with a dirty little attitude towards the people and a brutal sociopath, and so nothing would surprise me as far as Tony Abbott goes. And as I said, folks, this event in Sydney and the rhetoric and Islamophobia that's being whipped up in its wake has all the hallmarks of being a staged event. I would say the government's in on it, the police are in on it. They probably used a Mossad agent and then brought the patsy in and simply shot him and left him on the floor. I don't trust anything the government tells me, and I trust even less the rubbish that I get fed by the mainstream media. But again, folks, there are many people who are looking at this and saying, well, this is a setup. and they can see that it's a setup, and they can see that it's been staged by the government right on cue, as Tony Abbott was saying, of course, that he was expecting a terror attack. Of course he was, because his lackeys were probably planning it for him. And so what it has done is it has served to wake up a great deal of the population. And I'm frankly sick of these fake Muslims running around the world and blowing things up. You know, I've met a lot of Muslims, and everyone that I've met has been a really nice person, very down to earth, very helpful, very kind. Muslims are peaceful people, and Muslims are no threat to anybody, and all of the so-called Islamic extremism that we're seeing has been created by the West.